Hi everyone, my name's Electric Donkey, and today we're back on the No Man's Sky project type thing we've got going. And in the last video, if you remember, we did a lot on JSON files and fiddled around with that. And basically, I've sat back and looked at it and did a bit of research into it. JSON files do not really seem to be the best thing for what we're doing. So I've had a look, and they have to be in maps, so you cannot save a DS grid into a JSON file. So that's kind of a really big issue. So what I've done is I've gone through and changed it into an ini source script. So instead of using JSON files, we're now going to use ini scripts. So I'll just run you through what I've changed really quickly. So nothing in these first two scripts, but in the script save world and read world, there's been a few kind of massive changes. So the first thing I've done is I've just commented out this whole chunk that we wrote last time, apart from the text and fn variables. We're going to leave them there. Now here's where it gets a little bit different. So instead we've now got ini open. So you probably dealt with inis in your life before, but otherwise let me just run it through you. So you're basically opening up this file name that we've asked for the user here. Then we're going to open, and we're going to, well, I've already opened it, and we're going to write into it in our section, a section planet 1 in the key 0. This is just a thing to hold it. We're then going to write in our grid or text, which is here, which will be here, which will be in effect our grid. And then we just go ahead and close the ini. That's all we have to do to save it, really. So now if we go into the read file, by the way guys, you will need to be writing this down. In fact, I've got rid of those, so we don't need them anymore. But this is where it gets ever so slightly more technical, so in fact let's just chop them out as well. All you need for this one is a file name, so it's, again, we're opening up the file name, but then we are reading a DS grid, so we're looking into our DS, well, we're looking at where we need to read it. So basically the first thing we do is we get an empty grid. So in this case it's object worldgen.grid. Now this is quite significant. I'll go into explain where we make that later, but this is just an empty grid at the moment. We'll do a bit more into that later as well. So this bit is then saying we're going to read the string from our ini in our planet 1 section in the key 0, and that's basically exactly where we saved it. So we're looking into the place we saved our grid, and then we're going to load that grid into our empty grid. Then we're just going to go ahead and close the ini again. You need to do this at the end of each one. So that's pretty straightforward, right? But we're not quite finished. We've got a bit more in the objects sort of section. So nothing in these three objects have changed, only in the world gen. So first off, a really important point that I've actually missed off before. In the game end, or you'll have to make a event called game end, we need to destroy our grid. So in this case, we're going to destroy the planet grid and the grid, which we'll go into in a minute. So in the create event, I've made another script here, right at the top to make sure. And basically this is just calculating the width. We've seen that all before, basically just copying and paste that from the other create event. But then this bit is just making an empty grid, the width and the height, and this is just going to have all of it all a value of 0 until we put something in it, which is what the loading bit does. So it loads it into this empty grid that we've made here. So next, in the actual main create event itself, not really much happens here, not much happens, and then here's what happens a lot. So I've just commented out the whole of the rest of it. We can just completely ignore it, and then here I've just used script save world, and this is the grid.planet, and I've saved it into planet1.ini. You can put that as whatever name you want really, but just for this I'm going to put planet 1. Then it's saying script read world. So then straight after we've saved it, we're going to read it. This is just for testing purposes. And it's saying planet1.ini. And then these we don't need anymore, so we can get rid of them. All it needs is the file name. And what this will do is it will set our grid to equal our saved planet. So then later on what we do is this is just another, again for testing purposes, it will redraw the grid, but this time instead of using planet it will use our grid. So in effect it's going to be saving our planet grid that we've made here, then condensing that into an ini file, then pulling that back out of the ini file and putting it into a new grid called grid. Alright, that's kind of pretty simple, and this is just for testing purposes. So we can go ahead and run it, and in theory if we run it, absolutely nothing should happen. We should just be loaded into a world, but we will actually be saved. That world will be saved in an ini file. It's pretty mind blown, to be honest, but nothing will actually be shown on the screen. It will just load up as normal. Otherwise, if we get an error, then that's something that's gone wrong. So let's see. And no, we just drop straight in and we're into our world, and this world is now saved. We've loaded this up from the grid. So basically you have to run through them and copy them down. They won't take you very long. There's only maybe 10 lines of code in there, and they're not extremely complicated lines. So just go back, pause the video and copy them down into your own work. Right, so what do we actually need to do now? Well, I've missed a bit out, actually, of something that's quite important if we want to save several different planets. Because if you think about it, we're not going to want to just save one planet, we're going to want to save several different planets. So, how are we going to do this? Well, we're going to make sure that each grid, so, you know, we made this here grid, but this, after we've saved it once, is going to be full. This is going to be full of a grid. So how are we going to do that? Well, basically we're going to go back into our create event first, our main create event, and first thing we're going to do is just completely get rid of the read and this bit here, because all we need to do is save it. We know it's working now. So now it's saved it there, we need to go in and make a few changes into our read world script. So, first thing we need to do is we need to make sure that after we've read one of our worlds, that the other one has effectively had a blank grid to write into. Otherwise it will write into a full grid and it won't work as well. It'll take longer to do, basically. So in here we want to use ds grid clear object world gen.grid. In actual fact, do we want to do that? Let's think, because if we clear it, then it won't be able to work later. So in actual fact, that's not what we want to do. We want to put this at the top. So the first thing we do when we make a new thing. So ds grid clear object world gen.grid, and we're just going to put it as 0. So this will then give us a blank grid to then write in here, or to read into effectively, but it is writing the values in. So how can we put this into use? Well, we're not going to do it in this episode because it's going to drag on a bit, but the idea is now we can go into any other planets we like. So we can use this same object world gen object, and just after each planet we go into, save that world data. Then when we go out of that planet, we can go to another planet, load it in exactly the same, and then save it into a new slot in the ini file. And then if we want to go back to that first planet, we can just go back to that slot in the ini file, load it back up again, and there you go, you've got your planet back. And this will make it very well optimized, because it will mean we only have effectively 4 objects so far, and that's for everything. The planets will be all loaded in with 1 object and 1 ini file, and that's pretty well optimized in my opinion. But anyway guys, that's it for this episode. We've got the ini file writing working, and in the next video we'll go into how to make several different planets using that same 1 object. So if you enjoyed this video, remember to like, subscribe, or just do whatever you guys want to do, and I'll talk to you in the next one.